Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation on dioxins and dioxin pollution. If you've ever heard of forever chemicals, or PFAS, spelled PFAS, dioxins are a similar class of chemicals. PFAS can be found in all kinds of everyday objects, including grease-resistant food packaging, nonstick cookware, cleaning products, floss, and cosmetics. So today we are concerned about PFAS because they're constantly being produced and then dispersed into the environment and our food chains. And they're also considered a forever chemical because their half-life is up to 3 years. In comparison, dioxins are less prevalent but much more toxic and stay in the environment longer. The half-life of dioxins in comparison is 7 to 11 years. This means that after 30 years, dioxin pollution levels can still be over 10% of the original levels. Let's talk a little bit more about what dioxins are exactly. It is a class of chemicals with this specific ring structure, where chlorine replaces some of the carbon atoms. Their toxicity varies wildly depending on molecular shape. Their rings are similar to the molecule benzene, which consists of a single flat ring of 6 carbons and 6 hydrogen atoms. Like benzene, these molecules are nonpolar, which means they are fat-soluble rather than water-soluble. Out of this class of molecules, the most toxic is TCDD, short for 2378 tetrachlorobenzodioxin. So sometimes dioxin just refers to this compound. I earlier mentioned the toxicity of dioxins varies depending on molecular shape, and this dioxin is over 1,000 more toxic than the most benign one. Among other reasons, this is because the molecule triggers the AH receptor, also the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, which is responsible for gene transcription, detecting foreign chemicals in the body, and regulating enzymes that break down these chemicals. What exactly happens when dioxins trigger the AH receptor? And what else can result from dioxin toxicity? Because this receptor is so important, activation or deactivation of this receptor can cause gene mutations, and we know that one or more gene mutations can result in cancer. Therefore, this entire class of chemicals is considered carcinogenic. Furthermore, dioxins inhibit the body's ability to detect and break down foreign chemicals, allowing them to stay in the food chain longer since it is not metabolized. Aside from this one receptor, dioxin toxicity shows several other symptoms, such as chloracne, skin lesions and blisters, and can directly lead to death by overexposure, basically poisoning, especially for small children. In an accident in Italy where a huge amount of dioxin was released into the environment, which I'll explain later, pregnant women exposed to dioxin were advised to have abortions so their children would not suffer birth deformities. If dioxin is such a dangerous chemical, why would anyone manufacture it? One reason was that it was an impurity in Agent Orange, a terribly dangerous herbicide produced at scale during the Vietnam War. More generally, dioxins are not produced on purpose, but rather unwanted chemical waste products, which result from incomplete combustion of chlorinated compounds. This combustion can happen from anywhere due to trash fires, forest fires, or even volcanic eruptions. In developing countries especially, it is common to dispose of waste by burning it, which contributes to dioxin production. However, after dioxin's toxic effects were discovered, the Stockholm Convention banned dioxin production altogether in 2001. Because of its 70-year half-life, a lot of dioxin is unfortunately still present today, and most of it can be traced back to be produced in the 70s. Two major dioxin exposure incidents are notable, the first one being in Seveso, a small town in Italy. On July 10th, 1976, it was Friday afternoon, and the chemical plant was shutting down for the weekend. The plant's machinery was powered by a generator turbine, which produced steam as exhaust. To make better use of this steam, the steam was also used to heat a reaction vessel, which eventually contained compounds that would lead to a dioxin spill. But on Friday afternoon, as the workers were turning off the machines one by one, The generator had to power fewer things, so it spun up faster and faster, heating up the exhaust steam so much that the reaction vessel underwent an unintended exothermic reaction. Exothermic reactions produce heat, which allowed the vessel to sustain these high temperatures and keep the reaction going, continuing until thermal runaway. This caused the relief valve to open, dumping 6 tons of chemicals into the surrounding 7 square miles. A quote from the original Time magazine article in 1983 reads, "As the poison settled on homes and gardens in the following days, thousands of pets died, crops were infected, and hundreds of people developed nausea, blurred vision, and especially among children, the disfiguring sores of a skin disease known as coracne." Time magazine listed this incident as one of the top 10 worst environmental disasters in their 2010 edition. In the end, this disaster cost $32 million to clean up, which translates to $173 million in today's dollars. Furthermore, 33 women willingly underwent abortions for fear of their unborn children, and decades later, a follow-up study revealed an increased level of cancer in that region's residents. Another dioxin accident occurred in the tiny town of Times Beach, Missouri, and spanned a period of over 10 years, because nobody at first knew it was dioxin and thus did not fully comprehend the results, the possible consequences. So in this town, dusty roads were often sprayed to keep the dust down in the scorching summer heat. But water evaporated too quickly and was expensive to transport, so oil was used instead. The town asked Napaco, a chemical and pharmaceutical company, to spray the roads. They contracted Independent Petroleum Corp, which was mainly a chemical supplier, and they had no idea what to do with this oil. So Independent Petroleum Corp, or IPC, further contracted a man named Russell Bliss. Bliss, who had formerly sprayed horse arenas and roads before with used engine oil, assumed this was no different. However, Napaco gave Bliss waste from a plant that formerly produced Agent Orange, still claiming that it was just used oil. Bliss unknowingly sprayed this mixture on horse arenas, whose owners initially noticed it was doing an amazing job at keeping the dust down. However, to quote the original article, the owners ended up raking up hundreds of dead sparrows. Spectators noticed the arena was remarkably free of flies, and 2 previously healthy horses became ill. In the next 2 weeks, the health of a dozen more horses deteriorated, and their hide broke out in rashes. Cats and dogs were also soon found dead, who lived near the arena. The owner's daughter even became ill, and this triggered a much more serious investigation by the EPA. A couple years later, the EPA found the presence of dioxins, but did not seriously investigate it until 1979, because concentrations were low enough and the ill effects could have been caused by other chemicals. It wasn't until 1982 that testing was done, the residents were evacuated, and the CDC officially recommended Times Beach to not be re-inhabited. Unfortunately, in 1982, a huge flood also swept through the town, decimating it. Overall, this cleanup effort cost over $200 million, and all of the town residents were displaced and their homes bought out. The silver lining here is that this finally put dioxin into the public eye. This led to much more stringent regulations on dioxin production and disposal, and eventually led to the banning of dioxin in 2001 by the Stockholm Convention. What are some ways to clean up these dioxins? Well, since they result from incomplete combustion, complete incineration is the safest disposal method. However, this is difficult to ensure, and The waste cannot be buried as it risks contaminating groundwater. To date, there are now procedures in place to test dioxin levels at similar chemical plants. This below picture is actually taken from the border of Times Beach. It says, "Do not enter." Because dioxin production was banned in 2001, thankfully there are no sources of dioxin today that could lead to such environmental catastrophes. To lower your own exposure, the EPA says more than 90% of human exposure to dioxins is through food, mainly meat and dairy. To lower your personal exposure, they recommend a balanced diet, including adequate amounts of fruits, vegetables, and cereals, to avoid excessive exposure from a single source. However, they note that the possibility for consumers to reduce their own exposure is limited. One other thing you can do is, because dioxin is fat soluble, you can trim the fat off of meats and opt for low-fat options. It is important to note that unlike other issues, such as air pollution, it is not our own responsibility as individual consumers to reduce dioxin exposure, but rather the responsibility of chemical plants and manufacturers to eliminate dioxin production from the very beginning. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you learned something today. And these are the sources I used, including the original articles on Times Beach, written in 1983, an original article on the Seveso accident, written in 1978. Thank you.